Hey everybody, as promised, here is the review for your workbook pages that I've assigned. So we're going to start with the workbook review on page 100, which is for the short run aggregate supply curve. That is activity 3-5, if you're just looking at the top activity number. I'm going to go screen by screen, and you'll see I have scanned the answer key so that you'll see that in front of you. And I'll just kind of talk you through as quickly as possible what's going on here. So you'll see that we're talking about what's happening with the short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand curves if there's a shift. So basically they're saying for each of these, identify the price level, the equilibrium price level, and the real GDP. So you're going to then show what the shift is and then what is happening after the fact. So, oh man, you know what I did? I scanned on this one the this is how busy I was this morning. I scanned just your workbook page, but that's okay. I will go over it with you. So the first thing we need to see is what happens if there's an increase in aggregate demand. Obviously, if it says an increase in aggregate demand, this is the curve that's going to be shifting. You're going to have a new curve right here. It's going to say AD1. If you were to originally just label this is your PL. This is where your Y would be labeled. If you add the aggregate demand curve right here, our new intersection would be right here. So now what's going to happen to real GDP, price level, and unemployment if aggregate demand shifts to the right? That's pretty easy. A shift to the right means that we are increasing aggregate demand. Price level goes from here to here, so it's an increase in price level, and unemployment is going to go down. More people are going to have jobs. Okay. Here we're doing an increase in aggregate supply. So instead of the AD curve shifting to the right, we're going to shift the SRAS curve to the right. So here is our basic AD AS graph. This is our price level. This is our Y. If we then show a shift, our new SRAS is here, SRAS 1, which means that our intersection would be about right here. Well, I can tell that we went from here to here, so that's an increase in GDP. But if we were here at price level and we've gone down here, we're going to see a decrease in the price level, but unemployment is going to also decrease because we have shifted to the right. So just remember, whenever there's a shift to the right, there generally is going to be an increase in GDP and an increase in unemployment. Okay. Oops, sorry. Decrease in aggregate demand. So now we have our price level here, our Y labeled here. We're going to shift our AD curve to the left. That means that you'll have an AD1 here, which means our new equilibrium point would be right about here. A shift to the left means that GDP is going to decrease. Price level has also decreased, but guess what? Unemployment is going to increase. With a decrease in aggregate supply, we have our PL level here, our Y here. We're going to shift our SRAS curve to the left, so that would be an SRAS 1 right here. Intersection for our new equilibrium would be here, so this would be our new PL and our new Y right there. Again, real GDP has gone down, but this time the price level has gone up and unemployment has gone up. This is like a worst case scenario. Things are more expensive and less people have jobs. So that's not great. Let me know if you have any questions on that. Take notes. If you guys don't understand something, take notes where you're at. And then when we do a meetup, you can ask me that clarification. Here is our next activity. We're looking at just the long run aggregate supply. So you can see this is activity 3-8. This time I actually did scan the key versus just the workbook page. So you're going to see the answers are right here. We're looking at what happens when we have our AD and our SRAS curve, and now the introduction of the long run aggregate supply curve. So our first question here, what will happen to output, nominal wages, and real wages, and the price level in the short run, okay, if there's an increase in aggregate demand? So right now we're looking at this, an increase in aggregate demand. So output is going to increase. So you can see a shift from Y to Y1. That shows an increase in aggregate demand. The price level went from here to here. So you can see that that increased as well. And in response to, and that happened in response to the increase in aggregate demand. Now, remember, as the price level rises, real wages are falling, right? And nominal wages are going to stay the same in the short run because they're not flexible like the LRAS. Remember, in the short run, wages are sticky, so that is not going to be good for workers. Let's look at question 2. What will happen to the output and the price level when the economy moves to the long run equilibrium? So when we move to the long run equilibrium, what we're going to see is over time, wages are going to need to increase, and workers will start to bargain for that increase because they're going to see that their wages have actually fallen, that things have gotten more expensive, and so they have less purchasing power. And that increase in nominal wages is going to cause the SRAS curve to actually decrease, right? So now that we're asking for increased wages, this curve here shifts to the left because one of the resources, one of the inputs for making stuff has gotten more expensive. So it shifts to the left. Okay, here is our next page. We're seeing the last one was a change in aggregate demand. Now we're looking at changes in short-run aggregate supply. So after a short-run aggregate supply decreases, what happens to the short-run output, nominal wages, real wages, and price level? So if we go from here, our equilibrium point, and SRAS shifts to the left, right? So that's a decrease. We can see, do you see why labeling is so important? If this is our usual price level, now we're here, we can really see, and what I would do if I were you, I'd add a little arrow here in the direction going up, and I'd add an arrow to the left here, because that makes it really clear to you and whoever's grading your exam that the price level is going up and GDP is going down. So that helps us to answer the question really easily too. Now, because of the decrease in SRAS, what's going to happen is real wages initially will decrease with that higher price level. Nominal wages stay the same. Okay. Now, in the long run, we're going to have the output just return to the LRAS, right? And it says here, as the level of unemployment increases with the reduction in real GDP, nominal wages would fall. Okay, last one says on this figure, draw the long run equilibrium situation, include these. So they like to do this on the macro exam, like label this way. So you would actually label PL, Y, and SRAS. The SRAS shifts back to where it intersects with the AD and LRAS. So it's actually going to shift back here and return to the equilibrium. Okay. Now we have this scenario here that they're telling us, like, read the description for each kind of scenario and then draw your graph. So here's what they should look like. Feel free to pause and kind of just take a look at your work and make the corrections that you need to, and then unpause when you are ready for me to explain each one. So here it says the government increases defense spending by 10% a year for a 5-year period. I automatically go spending, government. That's going to be an aggregate demand shift right there. So that, and the shifter is government, it's going to increase it. So it's a shift to the right. So you can see AD goes from here to here. That's a rightward shift. Price level has increased. Real wages have decreased. Eventually, workers will bargain for higher wages, and then the SRAS shift curve is going to have to shift to the left to respond to those higher wages. So that'll bring us back to that equilibrium point. Here, OPEC cuts oil production by 30%. Automatically, if that seems like a resource to me. So that's a resource input price. That's going to hit SRAS first. That's going to shift our SRAS curve to the left. And we can see when that happens, when we go from here to here, price level has gone up. Unemployment has now increased. And that means that nominal wages have decreased as well. The government increases spending on education, healthcare, housing, and basic services for low-income people. No increase in taxes accompanies these programs. So we're having government spending, but we're not having a tax increase. And they're saying that on purpose because they want you to go, oh, the spending multiplier is going to have a big effect here. That's automatically going to impact aggregate demand. This is a demand shifter, government spending. It's going to increase it, go to the right. So we go from this equilibrium point here to this one. You can see output price level is increasing, which means unemployment has gone down. Eventually, what's going to happen as these prices increase, laborers, workers are going to demand higher wages, and that's going to shift your SRAS curve. And then we're going to be back at equilibrium, but we're going to be at a higher price point. Finally, number 11, can the government maintain output above the natural level of output with aggregate demand policy? This is very, very wordy, and there's a lot going on this graph. So just take it slowly. It's basically saying if we want the government to move the economy to YF, so this is at full employment right here, then it's going to have to increase aggregate demand, right? And that means that there's going to be a tendency for the short-run aggregate supply curve to shift to the left like we've been seeing before. Whenever aggregate demand shifts to the right, the response is that SRAS is going to naturally shift back to the left as workers are negotiating for higher wages to compensate for that increase in prices. So if the government wants to maintain at this level, it's going to have to continue to implement more expansionary policy. Now, I'm not sure if that's a term I've used before, but expansionary policy means that the government's going to have to take proactive action to continue things like spending or tax cuts to continue aggregate demand moving to the right. Okay, I think that's it. Hopefully it wasn't too long, wasn't too painful. If you have any questions or need clarification on these, just make sure that you're jotting down those notes. And then tomorrow I'm going to do, I believe, a meeting time, like probably mid-morning. I'll do one mid-afternoon, and then we'll see if there's a need to have one in the evening or not. If not, we'll just try to do like a morning session and an afternoon session and accommodate everybody. Feel free to make recommendations on what times are good, and then I'll try to kind of take that information in and we will go from there. In terms of submitting your work, just hold on to it right now. I'm not going to ask for submissions just yet. I think most of what the grading that we're going to do is on Albert questions, which brings me to your next assignment. I'm going to be picking some Albert questions on LRAS for you, and those will be posted on Google Classroom. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.